So I think there's a few people here. I hope that's correct. So it's Terry from Pelagic Dive Travel. I apologize for sort of the screen that you're seeing. I'll try and make the slides bigger and talk a little bit about us. So Pelagic Dive Travel, we're based in Melbourne, Australia, and a relatively new company in the sense of what we're doing. We've been around now for about 5 years or so, and we started out basically as an online travel provider, and we have a very unique search base inside our website where you can search what you want to see when you want to see it, and we started doing that. It sort of changed last year. We've always had a marine conservation focus, and last year we were part of the Sea Women of Melanesia project, which is a Coral Sea Foundation project. And we went out to Papua New Guinea to the conflict islands, a beautiful destination. And we taught, I think it was 18 women how to scuba dive. And then that was in the first week. In the second week, they were taught how to conduct reef surveys. And the women were all from around Milne Bay, that area. So local women. They have a matriarchate system. So the landowners in those areas are actually women. And it gave them a bit of self-confidence and actually made them or empowered them to be marine conservation advocates, which is a fantastic program. And it really opened my eyes up to the fact that more conservation needs to be done in those areas. Not so much in Papua New Guinea, but around the world, basically. So we've sort of changed our focus more to help marine conservation organizations and initiatives and really focus on how we can help increase their exposure and drive help to them. So if they're a new type of organization or initiative and they need a little bit of help, we can make or connect with local resort or liveaboards and that type of thing. Most of them will have sort of a setup for a visit and things like that. So we just try and help bring scuba divers to them. So we're based obviously in Melbourne, and I explained a little bit of what our focus is and run through the slideshow. Again, if you have any questions, just let me know as we go. I think there's people here. I can see people 3. If you have any questions that I mentioned on the way through, just let me know. So what I'll do, so we've got the conservation-based scuba dive travel itself. So we are a retailer, but also a wholesaler as well. And one of the main products or sort of stays that we have is actually for the conflict islands, which as you see there is a main part. It's a beautiful set of islands, 21 islands in total. But now, I mentioned it before, so our focus is to conserve basically what we're focusing on is that how does the operator work towards sustainable development, and it's primarily sustainable development goal number 14, life below the water, which as you see there, it's conserve and sustainably use the ocean, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. Now that's actually United Nations Sustainable Development Goal. There's 21 in total. Some of the other things is basically rid poverty, increase education, and that type of thing. So that's a main focus. So they all have to have a focus on this goal, or if they can, against all 21 goals. So what that means essentially is we ask a series of questions for a resort or a liveaboard, and the ultimate goal is not to say yes or no. It's more about to give them an idea of what they're doing and enable us to know what they're doing. So if it's a dive resort, it has to be sustainable. But what's also the key is it has to work with the local community. Now, some of the areas where these operations work are quite remote. So if they don't work with the local community, it's obviously not going to work. And not only will they get pissed off, but they're actually the people that should be empowering us as people to protect their own environment. Now, what I mean by that is that so if you're a local community and you're on a remote island, chances are that you've seen the fish stock start to decline and you need a way to help boost them back up. So it's not about us coming in there and saying, hey, you got to stop doing this. You need to talk with local communities about what they can do working together to collaborate. You can't cut out the local community. That was some of the problems with some of the conservation organizations when they first arrived in some of these remote areas. It's like, no, you need to do this, this, and this. But one flat program for a remote community will not work. You have to work with them to achieve the goals. And so that's why all these questions may work for some, but may not work for others. But it gives you an idea of where they're at and what they're doing. For example, if you're at a resort, you need to be working with the marine conservation organization or have an initiative in place. So the initiative could be that they're working with the local villages. They've actually started to look at how they can provide rainwater storage systems, tanks and that type of thing. They're working with the schools, so they've started to increase the education. And what it does is start to tie in, and they see that, okay, they're willing to help. It could also be them like local employment and that sort of thing. They start to bring on dive masters, train them up. And what that does is if they instill the goals in the education that you need to protect your environment, they'll start to see the benefit of that. Also, as I mentioned there, that some of the remote islands are noticing the decline in fish stocks. So they need a little bit of outside help to go, okay, what can we sort of do? And one of the people we work with is local marine management authorities. So they will set up, have a framework in place, and the community is willing to work with these because they'll talk to some of the people and say, okay, this area here at the end of the reef, they know at certain times of the year the fish are spawning. So if you have a no fish take in that area, it allows the stocks to increase, and they will understand that. Now, if you're on a liveaboard, it's a conservation. They need to have initiative or thing in place. But in saying that as well, it's a bit of a catch-22 because a liveaboard is obviously going to have emissions from its engines and that type of thing. Currently, where we are in the world, there's no real eco-environment engine type of thing where it's solar-powered completely or battery-powered. So they're working on that. But as long as the vessel is well maintained, regularly serviced, cuts the emissions down. But the key here as well is that they have to be making an effort. So you go out on the vessel, a 7-day trip, beautiful corals, remote areas, and you go down for a shower, and then they've got hand cream, soap, body wash, and then you realize that what they're using is not actually reef safe. And what's the point of that? Everything goes into the holding tank and then straight out to the ocean, which tends to be actually on the reef. So if the operator is not willing to change the products that they use, then that's something we will not touch. So again, a lot of these vessels will have some sort of community orientation into it, either on land, some of the things they visit, or they've actually got conservation initiative on board where they actually go out with some of the marine organizations, look at whale sharks, for example. Some of them have tagging in place. And just being on that trip alone, you can visually take photos for marine identification, like the whale sharks, Galapagos whale sharks. And some of those funds that are actually used for that trip to get out there are then used to go back into the research and the tagging on other trips, which you can't actually go on because of it's a research type trip. So there's some of the questions that we ask. It's not a complete sort of guideline in the sense that you have to say yes or no. As I mentioned, it's to give us an idea of where you are, and you have to be making an effort to be actually, willing to support the operation itself in terms of marine conservation, either in your own area or on the land with the local communities. So there is a few organization and bodies out there already that are working as a certification type body, and a lot of operators in the travel industry are starting to come into those. So you'll notice here on this slide that you've got, make sure you can see it. Sorry about this. As I mentioned, my little laptop on the side here that I'm double connected to has just frozen, so I can't put the slide up in total for you. So the main body of certification that you have out there now for tourism sort of certification standards itself. Now, there's a lot of bodies around the world that say they're basically a certification type agency for marine conservation and organization, but the core is they all have to be registered to be a part of the Global Sustainable Tourism Council itself, so the GSTC. And the criteria there is basically they evaluate, publish sustainable tourism standards, ensure that meets all the elements and is aligned or equivalent to, basically that it protects the local community and sustainable. So it's independent, it's neutral, and if you create like a certification type of standard in your own country, it has to align with their legislation itself, and that's how you register. So that's that little one you see in the corner there, GSST. So you can actually apply to them direct, but now you have other certification agencies like this one here, the Eco-Certified Ecotourism. That's the main one in Australia. It's been around for many years. And the Greenfins is also registered to that, as is the Travel Foundation and Travel Life. So that's the main key, and they all belong to those bodies. Now, as I mentioned, the eco certification in Australia has been around for many years, and it's a highly regarded certification standard. So they have, as I spoke there before, it asks a series of questions like, is the general business operation sustainable, reasonable marketing, brings into customer satisfaction as well, environmental management, education and interpretation, how the business contributes obviously to the conservation, and how business gives back to the local community, and does it operate with culture, respect and sensitivity. Sorry, it's 3 a.m. here in Australia. I'm just a little bit tired, sorry. Now, they have sort of 3 levels. So you got the nature tourism, focused around management of the nature environment, ecotourism, and they operate in natural areas, minimal impact, and the advanced ecotourism, which is sort of the highest level. And it's like providing or leading ecotourism products. So it leaves, again, minimal impact on the environment. And it's a self-assessment process. So there's no one that really comes out and checks it as such. But you do have a third-party audit process, which is done every year. Sorry, I should say it's done every first year of the certification and 3 years after that. So it's an independent, it's not actually governed and bodied, but an eco person will come out every 3 years to just make sure that everything is still being done correctly. So that's in Australia. And around the world, there's a few different governing bodies. Thailand has one, but it's not universal across every country, for one thing. So you start to have like the Greenfins initiative. Now, they're actually at the show. You may have seen them. So I won't dwell on them too much because you can check them out in the booth and that type of thing. I'll just read out what their goals are in that, because I don't want to get it wrong. So their mission statement is to protect and conserve coral reefs by establishing and implementing environmentally friendly guidelines to promote a sustainable diving and snorkeling tourism industry. And their vision is so that sustainable diving is the norm. Now, it's sort of in partnership with the UN Environmental Program, which is the Reef World Foundation. So it's got the UN backing behind it. And it's been adopted by 11 countries and around 600 individual marine tourism companies since 2004. And they're trying to promote the best practice in responsible marine tourism. So that's probably the leading one, especially here in South Asia, Indonesia, and that type of thing. And they're getting bigger and bigger. You may have noticed as well, they're starting to do that in Egypt, bring out the big program here, which is fantastic. And we're really behind the Greenfins Code as well. Don't be put off by their logo. It is a little bit old school. I believe they're going to change that, but I won't dwell too on much. So you've got the LMMA. I'll just put that there. This one here is Local Marine Management Authority. They're based around Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and I think it's it's not the Solomon Islands, but it's around the Coral Triangle in those areas. And Papua New Guinea, they're trying to bring it into legislation so they actually have the government sort of backing them. The LMMAs in Papua New Guinea are helping to create the legislation to protect areas, and then once it reaches the main government and local government, then it gives that body and certification teeth to actually protect those environments. Because unfortunately in Papua New Guinea, in some of the remote areas, there's a lot of shark finning or illegal. It is illegal, but there's obviously agents in those areas that encourage that activity because it's very, very profitable for local villages. Some of the fins they catch can sustain a whole community for a month or two just by 3 or 4 types of fins. So it is very lucrative. But when I was diving there last year with the Sea Woman of Melanesia program, the sharks are small, and I spoke to some of the local fishermen, and they was telling me stories of their grandfathers with some of the sharks bigger than some of the boats. And unfortunately, when I was asking them now about it, they were saying that it's actually very small, the sharks that they see. So 3 to 4 meters maximum. And I was astounded. I would have thought there would be some 7-meter sharks locally, but unfortunately they've been fished out. So they're working really hard to stop that. And let's stop this screen share today. Again, I have to apologize. I'm trying to do a slideshow, but the second screen that I use is a laptop, and it won't allow me in. It's frozen, unfortunately. So there's some of the certification agencies that we know and recognize and work with. So in Australia, the Eco Certificate Tourism is the main one. And we work with a couple of dayboat operators, which we currently have specials with part of the show, where you have a free certified scuba diver or a tri-dive with Passions of Paradise and Dreamtime Dive and Snorkel. And that one just above the Climate Action certification belongs to that as well, where the operator is doing something to help bring down their carbon emissions and obviously do the climate action. These are all, if you just search by the name, you'll find them online. So some of the conservation organizations that we work with and try and promote. So the one we're currently working with is this one here, the CICI. It's the Conflict Islands Conservation Initiative. It's based in the Conflict Islands in Papua New Guinea. It's Milne Bay. It takes around about 12 hours from the place of Alo Tower. So the main place you would fly into is Port Moresby, and then it's an hour and a half flight across the mountains to the township of Alo Tower, and then about 20 minutes from the airport down to the marina, and then you hop on their vessel. Now, the vessel that they have is a supply ship, but it used to be, what still is, but it's the Underwater Explorer. Now, it's a liveaboard that used to be based out of Port Douglas in Cairns. It's the 70s, I believe. It's a beautiful vessel. It's really well maintained, actually, by the Conflict Islands Conservation Initiative and the Conflict Islands Resort. So they're two intertwined. So you head out on the vessel. It takes 12 hours. And then once you get to the resort itself, so the Conflict Islands Resort, they have the Conflict Islands Conservation Initiative as part of the resort. It's a great little setup for the initiative. They have actually on the island, I believe, 8 tanks. And the island itself, Panacea Island, is the main one. The resort is located. So there's 21 islands in total. And on the main island and the surrounding islands, it's a nesting place for sea turtles. So you've got the green sea turtles and the hawksbill turtles, and they come in there. And during the season, so it starts November through to about February, they employ local rangers to go out on patrol, just make sure the turtles are safe, because when the turtles come on to lay their eggs, they're most vulnerable. And in Papua New Guinea, turtle meat was a way of sustainability their villages. So they're trying to, it is illegal, but it's still done today. So there's that illegal poaching that they want to stop. So being out on patrol, they just look after the turtles when they come on land to actually nest. And then they just make sure the nests are in secure positions. If they're not, they'll actually relocate them to better suited positions on the main island in fenced off areas and obviously clean sand. And they just ensure that for the incubation period that the eggs are safe. And then they obviously take notes, and 60 days later, they expect the eggs to hatch. So they'll be there watching and waiting for the little sea turtles to hatch, make it back to the ocean. And then they actually check the nest as well. And if the nest has any sort of sick or injured turtles, the little baby ones, they actually take them back to the sanctuary on the main island and put them into those tanks. And when they're in the tanks, they just care for them. If they need any antibiotics or any sort of injury assessment and that type of thing, and they'll clean them as well, because turtles need to be active to get basically the build up off the shells and that type of thing. And then when they're ready to go and they're healthy, they'll actually release them back into the wild. So fantastic. So that's the Conflict Islands Conservation Initiative, which is this one here. And actually, we're doing a talk later today. It's 11 o'clock my time. I think that's just at 1 a.m. in the morning for the UK time. So sorry about that. But we'll have Hayley Versace from Conflict Islands. I'll be talking to her about the work that she does, and we'll also have a local guide ranger actually joining us as well. So if you want to hear more about that, please come to our session on the main stage at 1 o'clock in the morning. These are all recorded, so you can actually download those recordings as well. Now, the Coral Sea Foundation was part of that as well. That's a new Australian-based non-for-profit. And they have the Good Concept program of the Sea Woman Melanesia, which I sort of spoke there briefly about, where they teach local, the incident that I was at was Papua New Guinea. They also have another one, or they ran another one after that one last year in the Solomon Islands, with another operator here on the show, which is Dive Munda, which went really well and has a fantastic program. I'll just do a shout out as well to Dive Munda. They have a program at the moment where they're empowering some of the local women and some of the youth of Solomon Islands in the area to go diving and teach them dive. Because if they're in the water, they're in the water and they see the coral reef and that, they become advocates for protection and that type of thing. So that's a really great program. And they're taking donations because obviously it's quite expensive to learn to dive. So please go and check them out at their booth. So Dive Munda. Now, the Coral Sea Foundation, it does have some trips in place, but obviously with COVID and that type of thing, they're running currently. I just saw on their site they've got a coral reef survey now in the Great Barrier Reef, which they're out on. And I just saw it. I think there's 8 people on board, and 6 of those have PhDs in marine conservation biology. So that's a fantastic. They're out there checking on the coral reef, doing a survey. So check out their media, Coral Sea Foundation. They're on Instagram, pretty active on LinkedIn and those types of things. The Too Rare to Wear is sort of an awareness program. It's about how turtles are being exploited at the moment around the world. There's still areas that sell turtle shell souvenirs, I suppose is the best way. So they have the bangles and the bracelets, and they give out product information, which you can find outside as well, about how to identify real tortoiseshell jewelry. If you would see that, you're supposed to report it to them and to the local governments because they need to stop that. Reef Teach is an education program in Cairns, Australia. So our sister company that we have runs Just Dive and Snork, has dive and snorkel trips out of Cairns on their site. And for every tour that we run through them, which is a day program, you can choose between a Reef Teach or a Sunbutter. I'll come to that in a moment. But Reef Teach is a marine biology talk that talks about the Great Barrier Reef, what you can see, how it interacts, and what you should do when you're out there snorkeling or diving. Obviously, the biggest concern that we have with all of our divers is that we have a no touch, no take policy, which should be in place around the world. We don't advocate if you go out on a dive trip and your dive master goes up to a sea urchin and cracks it open and starts to feed the fish. That's not really what we're about. It's about seeing them in the environment. Sure, there may be lots of sea urchins and that sort of thing, but that's not what we want to encourage. So we actively encourage the no touch, no take, and obviously being fin control, buoyancy, and that's something we look for. Which ties into like the Greenfins initiative as well. They have standards of their dive masters and instructors. But Reef Teach is a really good sort of introduction to the reef. So we give that as a free introduction before they go out onto the reef, the Great Barrier Reef. It's really informative and really instructive. And we actually offer that as well for any trips based out of Cairns. So you've got Pro Dive, which is a level of 3 days. At the moment, it's down to sort of 1 night, 2 days. We're not sure when that will come back. It's supposed to be scheduled later in the year, but we're based in Melbourne and our borders are still locked down, so we can't actually travel to Queensland, to the Great Barrier Reef. So we're doing a lot of local diving, but we also have restrictions in place, unfortunately, where we can only go 25 k's from our base or home or place of work. That's just increased from 5 k's, which was last week. So it's still hard for us to get out diving. They're hoping to open all borders around Australia by November, but we'll see how that goes. And international travel for us and for people coming into Australia does look a wee way off. So they're talking about bubbles from Australia to the talk is at the moment to go Fiji, maybe Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, those types of areas. You can go to Norfolk Island from New South Wales, which is off in that direction. And Indonesia, but Indonesia has a bit of an outbreak at the moment, so they're a little bit unsure. Just talked to Alo Cruises, and they're talking about how the borders will be open around about the start of January, which is good for them. And Singapore and those areas, but the long haul for Australians and probably vice versa won't be in play until mid next year. So, which is really unfortunate. So a lot of people were encouraging from when the borders open is obviously get up to Cairns and get out there. So having a free Reef Teach will help to promote the environment, because you've probably heard a lot of talk about how it's the Great Barrier Reef is declining. It is, sure, there's some areas which have been affected by bleaching, but there's other areas which are doing well. So it is a massive reef. It's not a small reef. So there's areas here which are really beautiful, and some areas have been affected. But just getting out there and seeing those areas for yourself, and what you can do in terms of reducing your waste and that type of thing, essentially should help the environment in the long term, which then should help all the marine areas and environments. So one of the other things that we do as well is we encourage reef safe products. So every booking that is done with us, we actually send out Sunbutter sun cream, which is a reef safe SPF 50, vegan friendly, reef safe, no chemicals, and can actually be used in an environment which it won't affect anything. It's non-greasy and that type of thing as well. So it comes in a sustainable hard tin, which is really good. We're looking at bringing in some products which is like a little travel pack that you can take on to liveaboards. So stay tuned. We're working with a few partners where we can do that as well. So we've talked about Conflict Islands Conservation Initiative. The other bodies that we work with, the big one is, well, I'll talk about, so Blue Ventures is a UK-based conservation initiative in the south. We were starting to work with them for East Timor. They have a great program in there where you go out and work with local communities and that type of thing. But since the pandemic, they've shut down their programs, unfortunately. They're still maintaining the locals in East Timor, but they've sort of shut down all their tours and trips and that type of thing, which is unfortunate. That's pretty much around the world. So some of the ranges in Honduras for turtles and that sort of thing are struggling. They've had some GoFund pages. SeaTurtles.org, so CSEE turtles.org has pages of ways you can actually donate to employee rangers. CICI, so the Conflict Islands Conservation Initiative, also need a little bit of help to help with their rangers. If you go onto their website, you'll see a way to donate, and you'll see the rangers that can be helped out by them. If you're still in contact with the conservation organisation initiative around the world and making donations, we please do encourage you to keep making those payments. Unfortunately, yes, we understand it's a bit of a hard time, but they're also struggling as well. So just keep that in mind. And we work with Galapagos Shark Diving. So these are a really organization that looks into the research and tracking of whale sharks in the Galapagos Islands. So Galapagos Shark Diving is the other side of the research. The Galapagos, they have the research arm as well, where they only take out researchers twice a year, and they will tag whale sharks and keep track of them, but you're not allowed by the legislation in the Galapagos to take people out on the research vessels. So they offer trips throughout the year, and they've just come back from one a couple of months ago. So if you go into Galapagos Shark Diving, the YouTube, you'll see the video report, about 18 minutes or so. It's fantastic. They saw so many whale sharks and saw so much, and the work that they do is fantastic. So we're looking go with them in 2022. We're not sure if we'll be able to get out to 21 with them, unfortunately. And they're doing pretty well. They've got, I think, 6 trips next year, and most of them are already booked. So if you want more information about Galapagos Shark Diving, yeah, please give us an email or send us your questions. And that's essentially what we're working with at the moment. We're also looking for new organisation initiatives that we can get, especially at this time as well. You're tending to find that the ones that are sort of more sustainable and looking for help are around at the moment doing that. So if you do know you're on that, marine organization initiative that needs a bit of help, some exposure or that type of thing, please let us know. So the trips that we have in the moment, so we've got the conflict islands with conflict island conservation initiative, and we're running group specials, so 5+1, where you can stay on the resort. And the resort itself is really nice. They've got basically 5 oceanfront bungalows, which you can see there. That's the relaxation area below the main building, where you have your meals and that type of thing. And all the meals are prepared fresh by a local chef and that type of thing. So you arrive at Alo Tower, you hop on their vessel, which is the Undersea Explorer. As I mentioned, it used to be, well, it still is, a dive liveaboard. So they've got 12 twin-share cabins on the vessel itself. So you'll leave from there. So you arrive in the afternoon. The connecting flights from Brisbane or Cairns into Port Moresby, and then from Port Moresby over to Alo Tower, which is about an hour and a half. And then from there, you hop on the vessel. So you'll get transfers from the airport down to the vessel. Now, you arrive on the vessel around about afternoon, and then you'll head out on the vessel overnight to one of the areas. Now, it takes around about, 12 hours to get from Alo Tower to the conflict islands. But we've broken that up in the sense that on the way out, you'll head out, you'll have dinner on the vessel, then you'll steam off, and then you'll moor up in an area on the way, obviously. And for that day, you'll be diving with manta rays. There's a cleaning station just in that area, which they'll take you to, and a couple other dives. So a really good way. Overnight will be done as basically a steam out to the islands itself. So you arrive on the island. So spend the first 2 nights on the dive liveaboard itself, and then you arrive on conflict islands. Now, the conflict islands is an area made up of 21 islands itself, and the resort is situated on the main island of Panasea Island. And that's also where the Conflict Islands Conservation Initiative is as well, where it has its little sanctuary. So you arrive there, and you'll spend 5 nights on that, and you can have up to basically 4 dives a day included in the package. So 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, 1 in the afternoon, and a night dive, depending on how things go. And all those dives will be done on boat to surrounding areas. So beautiful area for coral life. You can see from these pictures here, and the water is super clear. It is relatively warm. So a 3 mil wetsuit and that type of thing is fine. And the coral life is there is fantastic. I was there last year in August, and I would say it's like 99.9% coral coverage. It's just like blankets of soft corals, hard corals. And it's just a beautiful dive. Visibility 30 meters, drift dives, wall dives, and just amazing type dives. Lots of turtles, green sea turtles, hawksbill turtles, a few sharks, but not too many, unfortunately. The area around there has been affected, obviously, by fishing for shark, which is unfortunate. But a beautiful, beautiful experience. The dive masters are locals in that, been in the area for a long time. So this is the Conflict Islands Resort. You'll spend 5 days on the resort diving, and then you hop back on the boat overnight back to Alo Tower and then fly out. So in total, it's about 9 days, 8 nights. Excuse me. Which is a fantastic. We have a special offer. So if you want to send me your details, I can send that through for you about the offers that we have. So 5+1 for a small group. Coming back locally, we have Lady Ella Island, which is an eco-friendly island based in the southern part of the Great Barrier Reef. You fly from Hervey Bay or Brisbane. You can only get there by plane, and they have a range of accommodation with eco tents and that type of thing. Excuse me. But they do a lot of work for their sustainability, because they're in a green area, green zone. which is a protected area on the Great Barrier Reef itself, which is a no take, no fish, no spearing island. Sorry, zone where the island is located. And the diving around there is amazing. You can see the manta rays here. So there's periods of the time where manta rays congregate and they actually visit each other. Cleaning stations. It's the best place in Australia basically to see manta rays. The turtle population is massive in that area as well. Great coral coverage. And it works really hard on sustainability. So you can see how small the island is. And from there, you can see here, these are all solar panels. So they're working really hard to basically lower their footprint. They're trying to cut out generator use totally. So most of the time they do run on solar. And they have a desalination plant as well, which runs from that. So all the water is fresh. They don't have any plastic on the resort itself. So you need to bring your own water bottle or purchase one, which is really, really good. So they've reduced the footprint totally, which is fantastic. There's some specials there. We have a special as well for the turtle season, which is coming in next month. In Fiji, we work with the Voli Voli Resort, a beautiful resort, the top of the main island itself, about 2 hours out of Nandi. And they actually have a special running at the moment. You may have heard from some other operators as well. But beautiful operation property that they have in place. Ra Divers is based on the waterfront with them. And they work with the local community to educate their children and that type of thing. And again, get them out to the environment, to the marine environment, and educate them on fish species and that type of thing as well. What you tend to find is that on these islands, the communities are heavily involved in fishing, but half of the community may not actually have been in the water snorkeling or diving. So, for example, in Papua New Guinea, it's normally the men that do the fishing, and the woman will stay on shore. So, when we were teaching the ladies in Papua New Guinea, someone hadn't been snorkeling before. They were a little bit anxious. And then once we taught them how to snorkel and be in the water, they loved it. And they've become the strongest advocates, those people that are initially afraid. So having that education process right from when they're young about the marine environment helps to make them basically their own advocates for their own environment, which is fantastic. So the programs that they have in place there are really fantastic. Now, I mentioned about the Galapagos Islands and the whale sharks. So the Galapagos shark diving, you'll head out and you try and find basically whale sharks. At the time of year they go, there's abundance of them. Last year, I think they saw 14 on one trip. So that was fantastic. They head out with MV Aqua. There's a range of dive sites that they go to. It's a nice, clean, tidy boat. And it's basically just being out there, seeing the whale sharks is fantastic. And the funds we as well allocate. So we offer for every booking as well, we give back as well to them to help them for their next research project and tagging project that we offer. And that's running next year, 2021, September. I think there's a few places in August and September. We do have some offers running as well for our show offers, as I mentioned there, which, excuse me, are day trips in Australia. So we work with Passions of Paradise, and which is a nice catamaran that comes out of Cairns. It stops at 2 unique places on the Great Barrier Reef, which are really good to dive. A place called Three Sisters has beautiful coral coverage, lots of turtles. And what we offer is a free tri dive or a certified scuba dive for like a $20 deposit, non-refundable unfortunately, but $20. It locks in the price for $195, and you can book your travel right up till the 12th of December next year. We're basically just trying to encourage people to get out in Australia to obviously the Great Barrier Reef and support the local operations. So that's one, Passions of Paradise, and the other is Dreamtime Dive and Snorkel. It's a unique operation in the sense that It is a day boat that goes out to the Great Barrier Reef, but on that vessel itself, they talk about how the Aboriginal culture is intertwined with the Great Barrier Reef and conservation, and they actually do a traditional show and a smoking ceremony and that sort of thing, and you get to experience some of their culture. They do a didgeridoo presentation as well, just having some interaction with Aboriginal, not so much youth, but people from that area, which you may not be able to do that in the senses. Yeah, it's a great type of tour, and it's unique in that sense. Again, it visits 2 unique sites, same as all others. You have lunch involved, and that's a price of $199. Again, with a free tri dive or a certified scuba dive. And that price is fixed again and bookable up until the 12th of December. I do know that those rates will go up next year. So for $20 deposit to secure that price is fantastic. So again, if you were interested, you can leave your details or email me. So this is our contact page, info@pelagicdivetravel.com. So obviously email, Facebook, Instagram, Pelagic Dive Travel. Does anyone have any questions? I think there's a few people here. No. Problem is that I can see, I think there's people watching, but I don't know. Yes? No? Okay. No one has any questions about what we do? So I'll leave out our contact page. When I say we're based in Melbourne, Australia, as you just saw there, we do tours around the world. We spoke with Adele Cruises that you may be here on seeing on the show itself, Indonesian based. There's conservation travel trips as well, which we're going to work with them. So they're the new people we're going to go with next year, which is fantastic. So we do Lady Alley Island, bottom south part of the Great Barrier Reef, and we work with some of the operators out of Ken. So you've got ProDive, you've got the Mike Ball and Spirit of Freedom. They've all got scheduled liveaboards and reduced type of capacity than what they're normal doing in terms of their schedule. So if you're interested in doing those, again, you can reach out to us. All of these operators that we work with, as I pointed out, especially in Australia, are eco-certified, and the resorts that we work with as well. If you're traveling in Indonesia, you're unsure and you want to go diving, please again look for the green fins. And we're about advocating for the marine conservation organization initiatives around the world. So please try and support the local communities. No questions? Classic. I've been a dive instructor now for how many years? 17 years. And diving around the world. And unfortunately, I have seen the decline of coral and fish. And if we can help basically local communities protect their areas as long-term events, so the next generations will actually see those, which is unfortunate. So yeah, I'm passionate about that. So we make sure that we try and provide as much help as we can and that type of thing. Another person has entered. Hello. I'm sorry, I'm just sort of wrapping up. Pelagic Dive Travel is marine conservation focused. Oh, there's a kitty cat. Operation. So has to be conservation based for our scuba dive travel. Because again, there you are. Well, if you'd like to talk to me more, come into our booth, check us out. Send us an email for the specials. As I mentioned, we have a group dive travel package for the conflict islands in Papua New Guinea, which is basically 3 nights on the liveaboard, 5 days at a resort. Very remote type of diving, beautiful, beautiful coral coverage. And we have day trips available from Cairns with Passions of Paradise and Dreamtime Dive and Snorkel, which can be booked and taken up until the 12th of December next year. And those are day trips out of Cairns. We have a package as well with Volley Resort, which is in Fiji, a 7-night stay. And of course, Lady Alley Island, which is an eco resort based here in Australia. So if you have any other questions along those lines about marine conservation, what we do, please reach out, email us. I'll just bring that up quickly. At info@pelagicdivetravel.com. Again, I'm sorry about the presentation with the slides. The laptop that I was connecting to won't allow me to get into it, unfortunately. And of course, we are speaking with Conflict Islands Conservation Initiative later on tonight or this morning. It's 11 p.m. our time in Australia, so Australian Eastern Daylight Time. Or I believe it's 1 o'clock in the morning in the UK, unfortunately. But if you wanted to hear that, we'll be interviewing and talking to Hayley Versace, the curator of Conflict Islands Conservation Initiative, and the local ranger that they employ, the head ranger there, which is Stephen, who is a Papua New Guinean local. Well, thanks for spending the time. No questions? Okay. If you want to learn more about what we do, specials and that, please stop by our booth. But yeah, thanks very much for taking the time. I hope you enjoy the rest of the show.